Hello, welcome to Medicoria. In today's video, we shall be discussing the life cycle of the malaria parasite. Malaria is caused by the different species of a parasite known as Plasmodium. Plasmodium has 5 species that are capable of causing disease in humans. The first being Plasmodium falciparum, P. vivax, P. malaria, P. ovale, and P. knowlesi. P. knowlesi is the monkey type of the Plasmodium parasite. Plasmodium belongs to a phylum known as Apicomplexa, also known as the coccidia or the Sporozoa. These parasites are called Apicomplexa because they have special organelles at the apical end of the cell, which are made up of infoldings of the cell membrane. These special organelles are what the parasites are going to be using for gaining access or entry into the host cell that they are going to infect, as we shall see later on as we discuss the life cycle. They are also called sporozoa owing to the fact that they have a sporogonic phase of the cycle where they produce the sporozoites, which are then able to infect the host. The 5 different species of Plasmodium have a similar life cycle. As I've already mentioned, the life cycle of these parasites has 2 phases. The sporogonic phase, also known as the sexual phase of the life cycle, and the asexual phase of the life cycle. The sporogonic phase of the life cycle takes place inside the mosquito, particularly the female Anopheles mosquito, whereas the asexual phase of the life cycle happens inside the human host. As we shall see shortly, inside the human host, that is to say during the asexual phase of the life cycle, the cycle is further subdivided into the exoerythrocytic phase and the erythrocytic phase of the cycle. The exoerythrocytic phase happens outside the red blood cells, that is to say inside the liver, whereas the erythrocytic phase of the cycle, which in itself forms another small cycle inside the cycle, happens inside the red blood cells of the human host. Now let's begin to look at the life cycle proper. As with every cycle, there is no beginning and ending point because it's a continuous loop that keeps happening over and over again. But in this case, we shall choose to start from the point at which the mosquito bites the human being. In their own life cycle, the female mosquitoes happen to need blood from a human host such that they can be able to make eggs and then hatch cute babies. During the process of piercing through your skin to obtain this blood, the mosquito injects its own saliva, which contains anticoagulants that prevent your blood from clotting such that it does not clog its proboscis, such that it can suck this blood out smoothly. By this point, I think we already realize that the mosquitoes do not actually mean any harm, but are only trying to maintain the existence of their species. But if it so happens that this mosquito that is trying to obtain blood from you is infected with the Plasmodium parasite, while it's injecting its saliva, it also introduces a stage of the parasites known as the Sporozoites. The Sporozoites are the spore-like form of the parasites that begin the asexual phase of the life cycle. Once inside the capillaries of your skin, the Sporozoites travel through your bloodstream, through the veins, and then to your heart. From the heart, they're pumped through the arteries, and then they somehow end up in the liver. In the liver, they use the complex organelles at the apex of the cell to attach and enter into your liver cell. What is this parasite doing in the liver cell? 1, it is escaping from your immune system. 2, it is exploiting the rich environment of the liver. It is feeding on your glucose, on your proteins and other nutrients, and using them for its own growth and multiplication. To multiply, this parasite undergoes a process known as schizogony. Schizogony is a form of cell division where the nucleus divides multiple times before the entire cell actually divides. And so you end up with one cell containing multiple nuclei, as opposed to the usual kind of cell division where the nucleus divides once, then the entire cell divides to form 2 daughter cells. In this case, this single cell containing multiple nuclei will then divide to form multiple daughter cells at a go. At this point, we can already begin to observe the asexual kind of reproduction that is taking place, where one sporozoite can lead to the formation of multiple daughter cells. This cell containing multiple nuclei is known as the schizont, and in this case, since the schizont is forming in a liver cell, it is known as the hepatic schizont. In some species of Plasmodium, however, not all the sporozoites will progress immediately to form the schizont. Some of the sporozoites enter into a dormant form, also known as the sleeping form of the parasites. This stage of the parasite is known as the hypnozoite, hypno for sleeping. These hypnozoites can remain dormant for long periods of time, weeks, months, or even years, and then later on become reactivated to continue with the rest of the cycle. This phenomenon is what leads to relapse of malaria in those species. In malaria relapse, one suffers from malaria again, even without being bitten by another mosquito, but rather from a reactivation of the dormant liver stage of the parasite that can give rise to a full-blown illness again. There are two species of Plasmodium that can give rise to malaria relapse: Plasmodium vivax and Plasmodium ovale. Now, let's go back to our hepatic schizont. Once the schizont has matured, it ruptures, releasing several daughter cells into the bloodstream. These daughter cells are known as Merozoites. Mero meaning a portion of, which essentially means these daughter cells are simply portions of the hepatic schizont that ruptured. These Merozoites swim freely in the plasma, looking for red blood cells to infect. Once they meet a red blood cell, one or two of them will attach onto this red blood cell and enter into it using the complex structures that we talked about, the complex organelles at the apex of this cell. Once the Merozoite is inside the red blood cell, it transforms into an immature Trophozoite, which is the ring form or the ring stage of the parasite. Now, when you hear the word Trophozoite, tropho is for feeding. This is the actively feeding stage of the parasite. Again, it is feeding on the glucose. It is feeding on your hemoglobin, which is essentially a protein. It's also feeding on other nutrients that are found inside your red blood cell. And it's using all those nutrients for growth and for self-replication to form more of itself. The immature Trophozoite can take one of two lines of development. One, it could mature into a Gametocyte. As the word might imply, these are like the gametes of the malaria parasites. That is to say, there is a male and a female gamete. The male one is known as the micro gametocyte, whereas the female one is known as the macro gametocyte. The gametocytes are the beginning of the sexual phase of the life cycle of the malaria parasite. These loiter around in your blood until another mosquito comes to obtain a blood meal from you. Once these are inside the body of the mosquito, they undergo a series of developmental stages that lead to the formation of sporozoites, beginning a new phase of the cycle again. We shall be discussing these stages in the mosquito shortly. Now let's go back to the second possibility for our immature Trophozoite. If it doesn't develop into a Gametocyte, the immature Trophozoite can develop into a mature Trophozoite, which is the grown-up form of the immature Trophozoite. It therefore appears as a thicker ring. The mature Trophozoite again undergoes schizogony inside the red blood cell. This leads to the formation of another schizont, in this case the blood schizont or the erythrocytic schizont. Likewise, when this schizont matures, it ruptures, releasing more Merozoites. Then these new Merozoites will look for new red blood cells to infect and then repeat the whole cycle inside the red blood cell again, leading to continuous asexual multiplication of the parasites. This small cycle inside the larger cycle is known as the erythrocytic cycle of the Plasmodium parasite. As you can see from this cycle, one Merozoite can infect a red blood cell, multiply itself to form several other Merozoites, which then infect more red blood cells, which each multiplies to form several other Merozoites. In other words, if you begin with one Merozoite, you could end up with billions of Merozoites in your blood. This erythrocytic cycle is the one that is responsible for another phenomenon that is known as malaria recrudescence. In malaria recrudescence, one is treated for malaria with anti-malaria drugs, which kill majority of the parasites in blood. But then somehow, a few of the parasites survive. And then those few are able to propagate this cycle again, leading to a full-blown illness all over again. So this entire asexual phase of this cycle looks like a glitch in the matrix, where just one can produce many that can produce disaster. Well, let's go back and continue with our gametocytes to look at the events that happen inside the body of the mosquito. I personally do not find any clinical utility for the stages of the parasite that happen inside the mosquito, but I believe this can be useful when it comes to prevention. By understanding the stages of the parasite that happen inside the mosquito, we could potentially be able to develop measures that could intervene in the development of this parasite inside the body of the mosquito. Like we said earlier on, when another mosquito comes to obtain a blood meal from an individual who is infected with malaria, and probably this was a mosquito that was previously not infected with the parasites, it picks up the gametocytes. This particular fact is important because the people who are infected with malaria are somehow a reservoir for the infection that will later on be transmitted to other individuals. It is therefore important that anyone who is infected with malaria parasites, whether symptomatic or asymptomatic, should get treated to get rid of these gametocytes such that other mosquitoes cannot pick them up and transmit them to other individuals. So once the male and the female gametocytes are picked up by the mosquito, they migrate to the stomach of the mosquito, where the microgametocyte penetrates the macrogametocyte, or the male gametocyte penetrates the female gametocytes. Once they fuse, they form a zygote. More of what happens when human beings mate and the sperm and the ovum meet to form a zygote. The zygote then develops into an ookinete. The ookinete is the motile form of the parasite in the mosquito. The ookinete is able to migrate into the midgut of the mosquito to form an oocyst. I would compare an oocyst to a schizont in the human being, because an oocyst is essentially a bag of nuclei that are later on going to develop into multiple sporozoites. Once the oocyst matures, it ruptures to release several sporozoites that find their way into the salivary glands of the mosquito. This whole process from picking up the gametocytes in the human being to forming new sporozoites takes about 2 weeks on average. Once the sporozoites are now present in the salivary glands of this mosquito, once it goes to pick up a blood meal from a human being, it then injects these sporozoites into the bloodstream of that human being, beginning a new cycle altogether. This whole thing keeps going on and on and on, giving rise to the malaria life cycle, or the life cycle of Plasmodium. Thank you very much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the video, please smash that like button. And if you'd like to watch similar videos in the future, do subscribe to the channel and don't forget to turn on your notifications. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or concerns, please feel free to leave them down in the comment box below, or to send us an email on medicoria@gmail.com. If you'd like to do further reading on this topic, we provided a link in the description box of this video that you can click to read more about the life cycle of the malaria parasite. That's it for today. Thank you and see you next time.